batches, so it worked out fine.
Are we ready to start, or do you just let me know when you're ready?
We're Brian will be coming in just a minute.
Okay.
Alex, are we good? Do I need to send her on the sheet?
Nope, it's going
Oh,
to. So I'll just go ahead and start chatting, but you guys let us know.
Sure.
So I do know that you all met last night, and so we can do one of two things. We can either kind of review we talked a little bit, well, most about yesterday were the adjustment to, the areas that had a financial impact to the district. And so we reviewed those yesterday. We could go over that, and mainly the new Article 41, since our last time that we met as a large group, but I think you probably reviewed those. We can either go through those main topics again, 41, the new Article 41, terminal pay, salaries, or if you want to ask questions or have any questions or clarifications on that, Lindsay, I'll kind of let me know how you want
Well, we did, what I had, so what we did last night, just to kind of
to. Sure.
pass on to the team, is just took the excerpts that we'd highlighted in our meeting yesterday from the total count proposal.
Right.
Went ahead and sent a copy to the team so they could look at kind of what was new, more like what was new.
Okay.
And then also talked about the salary counter, the salary counter. And what I did was, and I'll make copies for everybody, but basically it's just the same document that we had produced before, but this is just your counter proposal. It's what you proposed before and then adding the counter proposal in, so you can see all the different levels. So I'll copy.
Oh, I was gonna take
You got
you
that? Okay.
over there.
And that way everybody can see. And we can, and I think probably, especially because we're,
We get one more for Jody too, just for record.
sure, here.
She's got it.
Get Jody, got it? Okay. So all we really did was take the counter that we discussed yesterday and as a group and talked about it a little bit as a group, just intro what we were looking at. And then today produced this, which is really just the document that we've been using before. You'll see that on each of these sheets, the very lightest columns on the left for all of these pages, there's a page for every. I know it's not really there's only really two separate scales or schedules, but
Yeah.
when we got so the blue is the grandfather scale. The yellow is for those highly effective employees who are highly effective. Green is for effective, and the pink color is for below effective. I know they're not different schedules, but it's just a way to see the way that this would affect different groups.
So can I just clarify that? And really, it's, I'm just going to use colors. Elementary
yeah.
people, yellow and green. When we start, actually, and the red as well. I just want everybody to make sure everybody is on the same page and the understanding that performance, you do not have a level. If you're on the performance, you have a salary that you have been using for the last several years. And it's all based on, it is based on the effective, if you receive highly effective, you are adding to your current salary, which might not be at step 9, I might not be at 49,292. Okay, so we have to understand when you're on the performance scale, you are placed at a salary when you are hired, and then you never see a grid, so to speak, because Nancy and I could be hired at the same time at 47.5. Nancy gets highly effective, so the next year her salary is something. I'm effective, my salary is 1. It's different, and then next year she might even get highly effective again. I might be effective again, or I might get. It never, so I just want people to know that when you're on performance, You're not on a grid. Okay?
Okay, yeah,
Do you
I think we're saying the same thing. The reason that I, maybe I'm not, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that the reason I did it in 3 separate pages
Yeah.
is to show, like yellow, this is the way that all of these numbers that we've been talking about in terms of the proposal pans out depending on what year of experience, current years of experience. And then the increase amount, of course, is higher for highly effective this year versus mandated by statute, of course. So you can see that the way that all of these.
I think, Lindsay, I think it's good for illustrative purposes, but what we don't want to do, I think Paula's point is, what we don't want to do is give somebody the impression that if I'm on the performance schedule and I was highly effective last year and I'm year 7, for example,
That's myself.
my pay amount is this much,
Right.
but it may not be because I might have been different
We
over the
can't,
course.
right, we wouldn't be able to give this to the members because they.
It would confuse them because everybody basically is on their, everybody who's on the
I'm at
performance.
the wrong salary. and it's like,
So
no,
everybody
no.
who's on the performance schedule is
Okay.
basically on their own salary schedule, because to Paula's point, Nancy could have been hired and went to the performance schedule. She could have been effective the first year, highly effective the next year, needs improvement the next year, highly effective, needs improvement, highly effective. I doubt that was the case for you.
Which is why we usually have we absolutely have the grandfathered grid. But then when we talk about performance, we just you take your salary from 21, 22 and add 1,500,
Yeah,
1,400,
gotcha.
right?
Okay, yeah,
I just want to make sure that,
I think we're saying, yeah, I may not be.
I know we're
articulating it,
getting to the same result,
Yep.
but the way that it's written here, I just don't want people thinking that
Okay,
everybody is on a grid. The only people that are on steps and are
Grandfather.
grandfather.
okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Okay,
Just
I
want to
think
be clear.
maybe,
I'm sorry
I
to
don't know if
interrupt.
somehow I was looking at it like it was I was sort of representing it across the pages. But either way.
No, it's a good way to illustrate
it
it.
is a great way to illustrate.
Yeah, the idea was that somebody could look at, they could find, because, and I think that, I do think, Paula, and because we were the ones that had some familiarity with this, but y'all haven't had the chance to really talk to the team about what you proposed. It
Right.
makes sense to walk through it,
Yep.
but because
Okay.
what you had proposed, there were a couple of examples that you gave of 5 and 12, and I understand, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
12 and 25, which
12.
makes sense because of the grandfather, the grandfather scale starts at 12 years of experience. This would allow people, anyone, to look at their own, they could look at their own salary and cross-reference.
So what I would suggest, and it's just my,
Just take out the years.
well, what I would suggest is you have a one sheet for performance,
Uh-huh.
right? And and we don't put a number there. You put 21, 22 salary, because anybody can go on ESS and find their salary. It's a step for people to do. I understand that. You leave it blank. You leave it like an X or an N.
Uh-huh.
And then you say, and add this, and add this, and add this, and then you get your individualized, and that's what it is. It's an individualized salary then.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
So it's just my suggestion, just because I
Okay.
don't want, we've worked hard over the years to get people, to get
Yeah.
people to understand that,
Sure.
and then, yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, this is what we sort of exchanged before.
Yep.
All I did here was add the additional hourly increases.
Right,
I
and we
didn't-
understand
yeah,
that. We
okay.
understand that we're using it,
Just
but
wanted to make sure
I,
that wanted to let y'all know that's what we're.
perfect,
Yep.
okay.
Just to get an idea of percentage
Sure.
spreads.
Sure.
That was
Sure.
really what the
Yep.
end goal was, is to look at percentage spreads.
Gotcha, okay. So I.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
Because we discussed it as a group, but I think particularly because we're live streaming, if you guys want to take the opportunity to walk through what you presented to us.
Sure, the financial impact
Yeah.
ones, okay,
Thank you.
sure. Should we stick on salary then for just a moment? Or it kind of ties in, no, I think we need to do that, I'm so
Think
sorry.
Article
Yeah, let's talk
41.
about Article 41.
Yeah.
So we have 3 different areas, and if you, we'll start with the Article 41, and that is on page 52 of your packet.
Sure, I'll
Yeah,
walk them through.
okay.
So we came up with the structure so that we could marry the increases and some of the concerns we've heard with training and with time to the purpose of ARP ESSER. And so we know that the additional training is necessary and it certainly benefits students. We know that additional planning is necessary, and we know that teachers work over their contract hours anyway. So this is a way to compensate and recognize that the planning does fit with the purposes of the ARP ESSER. So what we did was we added for all instructional personnel an additional day, 7.5 hours of pay. So additional day added to all of the teachers for planning. And that would just require a notation as to what was done. And again, we understand that people work over that anyway, so that would be documenting what is done anyway. Paragraph C is recognizing concerns that were raised that ESE teachers have had increased requirements and need additional time to do that. So we have added 2 days for ESE teachers. And that is for planning and to accomplish all of those compliance obligations. And again, that would require documenting things that we understand are already being done. So that would be 3 additional days of pay for an ESE teacher and for planning, and 1 additional day for a non-ESE teacher. We also know that there's training that is required, and we're calling it targeted training. And I'll use, for example, the BEST standards. That is one of the things that is going to, people have to sit and get the training for. So what we've done is add 2 days, because trainings are typically 6 hours. So we've added 2 days where payment will be made at the hourly rate for training. We've also suggested that non-targeted training will be paid at a rate of $22.50 per hour. And then paragraph F in Article 41 shows that we know that people don't all get hired at the same time. So if a teacher's hired at any time during the first semester, the full amount would be applicable. But for those that are hired during the second semester, essentially the amounts would be cut in half. So instead of an additional day for planning, 2 more if you're ESE, and 12 hours for training, it would just be cut in half if you're hired during the second half of the year, during just 1 semester. So we've quantified that, and I think that was passed out, right?
Yes.
Actually, this is a separate handout that I don't think got out yet.
So
Okay.
the
This is
train,
what we got here.
yeah, the training aspect would, given that we're in January at this point, wouldn't start until next year. But this would be for 3 years, and to cost it out for the 3-year term is $18,179,180,000.
So for just the ones that Lori mentioned, it's in the middle there. So on the top, we just included, what was the salary, the healthcare, we're going to talk about terminal pay in a minute, and COVID sick leave. And that is just kind of a good estimate Kevin has provided for that. But in the middle part, that's where Lori had just described the additional planning availability, the additional training availability. I did put a little asterisk next to those that are paid at hourly rate, because again, I just wanted to respond to, that was we heard loud and clear from the group about differentiating, payment for the work that is being done. So we made sure, we wanted to make sure that was being recognized. The $22.50 for just training across the board, obviously is just $22.50. So that wasn't, and so forth. So you can see over the next 3 years, how much of the SRR funds, would be put towards that implementation. Kevin, did you have anything else on that section or anything?
Not really, just to point out that the 21-22 fiscal year, that the number below the middle section, the 26 nearly $2 million, represents the total of the top part, which is compensation, and the middle part, which is the SRR funding. There's nothing below the other 2 columns because we don't know what next year's raises are going to be. So we gave that for reference purposes to show you what the use of the ARP ESSER money will be over the next couple of years. So the total would be nearly $18.2 million. Okay.
And on the bottom, we just gave an example or a sample, and they are asterisks just because we were using the increase based on the grandfather increase, but you would show you there as a 12-year employee or a 25-year employee hourly rate, what it would include for the 7.5 hours of planning, if you are ESC, we included that, and then the 12 hours, which are noted for next year and the year after. So, but since we're already, into January this year, so just to give you a sampling, just because we know sometimes the big numbers kind of get lost, and it's about what's it going to look like for me,
Right.
and so we just wanted to provide that. So that's just information for you. Do we want to go then into terminal pay, because that is another financial impact that we heard and we've been listening, and we wanted to provide a counter to that. I believe that's Article 20, which is on page 26. Actually starts on
25.
That's on
25.
25.
And you
Yeah.
explained it so well yesterday. So I'm
Okay,
gonna let you do that again.
So there was a proposal, there's a highlighted section here, and really I highlighted it only for our ease of reference in talking about this.
So we're on page 26 right now.
26, we're on, there's a highlighted portion, there's also parentheticals, but there's a formula currently that doesn't completely comply with the statute. So we're fixing that, and we're also clarifying. So the statute doesn't distinguish any longer. It used to in years past between terminal pay upon death and terminal pay upon retirement or other reasons. And over the years, we just kept the distinction. So part of this proposal is, let's just clarify it, because our current policy, our current contracts say that after year 13, if there's a death, you kick it into the formula for retirement, but it lays it out separately. So we collapsed those because there's really no reason to treat it separately. So the formula, what's in yellow is the maximum amount under the statute, which is 101261. And so those amounts are dictated by law. So they are what they are. Okay. What we've done, or what we've suggested, is changes to the other years by 5%. So if you look on page 26, currently for years 16 through 20, current contract and policy language allows for payout upon retirement at 70%. We bumped it up to 75%, and likewise 5% increments. So currently 21 to 25 years, the payout's 80 upon retirement. We're suggesting 85%, and so on. So it's a 5-year bump for those years.
5%.
5%.
Is a year.
Oh,
5%
5% for those years 13 and above. No, well, right now, the proposal is that this would occur upon ratification of this agreement and approval by the board. What we had thought, because this is a big ticket item in terms of dollars, of if the proposal for more that was made in July is something that would need to be phased in. I know we had a discussion at one of our meetings about that any change would require starting from July 1 forwards. In other words, so if next year you accrue 10 days and you only use 4, and you got 6 left, and you retired, you'd be paid out at a higher rate only for those 6 days, not what's been accrued in the past. And I know when we kind of floated that, I didn't see a great deal of enthusiasm for that. So we said, well, let's not make it as complicated, and let's see if we can't do something right now, but we have to keep it affordable. And that's why the bump is 5% increments. But again, the part that's in yellow is something that's the proposal from PCTA was to change those, and that's not something we can do due to the statute. 101261 dictates those years and what the maximum payout is. Questions on that?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So let's just say right now, like, aren't those days sitting where they can't be touched? That, I mean, it's money put, I mean, because technically I could use all my sick days right now if I had to, and I got, I don't want to, if I don't get billed, but isn't that money just sitting just in case those days are needed?
So I'm going to get geeky accounting on you. It's what's known as an accrued liability, right? So that means we have some future liability that we're gonna have to pay that at some point. That liability currently is about $90 million district-wide. That's for everybody's accumulated sick leave under the current structure, not under this structure, but under the current structure, how much it would cost if everybody walked out the door tomorrow. So we have to accrue that liability, but in no way does any district, nor do we, set aside that kind of money. I mean, it's a liability we're not gonna face, but that liability is gonna be faced incrementally over the course of a bunch of years. So last year, for example, our payout for sick and vacation leave was roughly $8.7 million. And it's typically what it is on an annual basis. So that's how we meet that liability every year. We pay it incrementally as we go along, as people retire. So by doing this is going to increase that liability, number one, and it's going to increase also the annual payout, number two. So yes, you're right. The sick leave is there for you to use, but there is no real pot of money that sits there. I mean, if the entire district, this is a ridiculous scenario, but if the entire district that were eligible decided to retire tomorrow, we would have a hard time paying that $90 million, is my point. So we face that liability incrementally over the course of years, every year. Our least amount we've ever paid, as far as I've been here, has been about $6.5 million. Our most amount's been about $13.7 million. So, you know, we shell out that cash on an annual basis, knowing that we have that future liability. Okay. Hope that wasn't
Yeah, I
confusing.
just, I
Great
didn't know
question.
how it works.
Yeah.
That's an excellent question, actually.
I do have a question. I'm looking at the statute, and Kristen had talked a little bit about this last night, and so I think it's important to review her, and maybe I wonder if maybe we're looking at it two different places, certainly in two different ways. The statute that speaks to this is 1012
61, 10, 12, 61.
61.2 or 2A4. And there are maximums established there. But I don't see that the limitation is based on retirement. I do see that there's a limitation based on termination of employment by death of the employee. There are maximums, but there is no limit on the policy that the district can establish regarding terminal pay for any other reason.
That's right.
Obviously, retirement would read into that. It does delineate a number of, basically you can get to the 13th year of service to see 100%. But the statute doesn't.
If what you're saying is the statute would allow payout upon resignation, you're right. But that's not something we're inclined to consider. What we're inclined to
Right.
consider is resignation, is retirement. And obviously we can pay out on death, and we do, but we just clarified that we're going to use the same schedule for both.
I'm sorry, so maybe I was misunderstanding what you're saying. I do understand that you're declining to pay out for a resignation. We talked
Okay.
a little bit about that
Yeah.
yesterday. I understood that that's really just a pass. But I understood our discussion yesterday to be suggesting that the statute establishes these maximums even regarding retirement, like the rate of payout upon termination via retirement or separation via retirement. And I guess I just want, and like I said, Kristen, we talked a little bit about this last night, and she was, I think, very correctly pointing out that I don't think the statute establishes a maximum even if we only kept it as the retirement percentages. Like under this proposal, at year 13, the rate would be 70, well, as it stands now, 70%. And then you see a bump after that. But statute doesn't really drive that. That's contract.
No, I
Right.
disagree.
Okay.
If you look at the history of this statute, the one sentence was inserted, subparagraph 4 applies to retirement and death. And that sentence does not limit, the sentence that says if it's by death does not limit the applicability to the formula for retirement. In other words, we're bound by this formula for retirement and death. And I know how you're reading it, but if you search the statute, how it evolved over the years, I would have to disagree that.
I see what you're saying. So you're suggesting that second sentence in the paragraph all that does is allow this to be paid to the beneficiary
Right.
rather than,
Correct.
okay.
Right.
But even so, right, and I can understand that in terms, obviously I'd have to look back at previous versions of the statute, but I understand what you're saying, and I don't think that that's unreasonable, but I further understood you to be saying that what we have in place now currently is to comply with the limitations of statute, but the limitations imposed by statute obviously are higher than what we actually have in place now. So what we're suggesting is, or if I'm understanding you correctly now, is that part of it is, for example, there's no statutory reason why we can't exceed 70% at 13 years.
Correct. You
That's
can
correct.
I
pay
just
out,
want to understand.
That's correct.
the statute would allow a payout of 100% after
year
13 years.
Correct.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I just wanted to make sure that we
Yep.
were clear on that.
Yep,
because
no,
I
we're
think
clear
that's
on
been a
that.
point of disagreement.
Yep.
Yeah,
No,
we
no.
wanted to clarify because the statement has been made that we're limited to what we have by statute, but
Well, that was the point of me putting this in yellow.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the statute would only go up to paragraph D. The rest is something
Subject to bargaining,
we're
yeah.
negotiating
Right.
now.
Okay.
And those other limits beyond the 13 were put there for monetary reasons, not necessarily statutory.
right,
reasons.
Yeah,
it wasn't
yeah.
statutory
Exactly.
as
Exactly.
So all
What's been
we're saying is
stated, it's
we're
not
agreeing to
Precisely
bump
right.
up those those discretionary amounts. We're agreeing that to bump them up by 5%.
I see. And will you walk me through again? I apologize. I just want to make sure I understand. When you're talking about these bumps that we see in this proposal at year 16, 21, 25.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Help me understand what you were saying about phasing that in.
Oh,
Or what you're
when we
proposing.
first discussed this at one of our meetings,
I remember discussing that. I
yeah,
can't,
we,
like, quite
what we
write it
said
down.
we were looking at was if we were going to increase the amounts in any substantially, because the request was substantial increases, that would be something that would have to be phased in over time. And so we were looking at doing sort of a two-tier type of system. So if we were going to have a higher payout than for example, what we proposed or some other proposal, if we're going to have a high payout, that's not financially feasible. We would have to phase that in. So that what we kind of discussed was that it would only be the amounts accrued after a certain date that could be paid out at the higher amount. And I know I mentioned that, and again, I'll use as an example. So if we said that at year 13, 100% could be paid out for people who retire, that would have to be only for those days accrued after July 1, 2022. So you could be paid out at 100% for the 5 days you might have accrued and not used next year, but you'd use the formula we had before for what you have in your
Anything
bank.
prior.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's still
when
part
I-
of your proposal.
No.
No, I'm
That's
not,
not what-
because
that's
when
not
I
what
kind of
proposed.
mentioned it, everybody went, oh. And so we said, yeah, that is kind of clunky and not really excitable. So we thought, let's try to make it cleaner. And this is something we could do, bumping up by 5%. And then
And,
Kevin
and,
quantified it and
yeah.
said we could do that.
and more
see.
understandable too, because it would be a highly complicated system if you had two sets of vacation,
That's
two
what,
sets
yeah,
of sick
that's
leave.
Yeah.
what, that's what I.
Yeah.
think
Yeah, and that
was
was
the-
just too clunky and too
was
difficult to
the-
say.
yeah,
So,
for that.
so we
Right.
felt that, this was something we could, this equates to, my estimate is looking at who retired last year and what it would have been last year, how much it would have cost us, about $1 million. And, it could be more than that, could be less than that, more than likely more than that, because, as we go on, more people are going to retire, especially if, it becomes more attractive that somebody at 25 years can get 95% instead of 90%, that might push some folks out the door. So at least initially, it's probably going to be more than $1 million that I anticipate. But I think we're comfortable with that financially. And the complication of having to monitor and account for two separate pools of sick leave would be very complicated for the employee as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we sort of regrouped, came back and thought this was something that is a pretty significant benefit. And something that can be done. I mean,
Well, and given Dr. Grego's announcement today, I'm sure he appreciated a less complicated. I know this isn't exactly his contract, but I'm sure he appreciated a less complicated.
Yes. Did you have a question?
Yeah, my question was how many, because you said you were looking at numbers from last year, so about how many of those that retired last year were less than 30 years.
You've asked me a question for which I don't have an answer, which is unusual. You have an answer for everything. I could make something up, but that would be wrong. I don't know. I could get that information. I really don't know.
I was just wondering number wise.
Yeah. I mean,
Because now that it's harder and harder to get your 30 years, you do have teachers that come in, you know, as a second career and stuff. So I'm
you
wondering.
do. And there's a lot of factors when it comes to retirement, right? I mean, let's say somebody is 50 years old and they've got a lot of sick time accumulated and they want to retire. Well, there's a couple of options you could take. If you're in the defined benefit plan, you really can't retire at that point because you're 12 years lower than what the actual retirement age is. And you take a 5% penalty for every year below 62. So you'd basically be owing the state money when you retire under those circumstances. If you are, however, in the investment plan, it's a different set of circumstances. So it's different for everybody. It depends on which plan they're in, what their age is, and how many years of service they have. So it's difficult to quantify, what that might impact, what that impact might be.
What about the other idea that we talked about as to ease the burden on the district for, end of year payout, for annual payouts, to have like a buyback system that to allow up to a certain number of days that an employee could buy back
We
sick time?
talked about that several years
Because then
ago.
it would go out at a lower rate if they're buying it
And
back. at that
honestly,
year.
well, we really are tied to retirement. That's different than retirement. That'd be kind of like almost saying that somebody who leaves can get paid for it, and there's some complications with that. But beyond that, I think there's complications with IRS code as it relates to that. I had Ted Bufundy, you might remember him, look into that several years ago. We had that conversation. It was back in the days when we were in the recession. We didn't have really any money to give any raises. But he came through with a proposal where I actually asked him, hey, can we let people buy out their sick time? And at the time, and I may not be the case today, but at the time, IRS had a restriction against doing that. And I don't know if that's the case. But again, it's going to take that $8 million and it's going to stretch it out, but it's also going to make it a higher annual cost. Because you're going to have those folks that retire in addition to those folks that want to
To
cash
people who are
out.
buying out, yes.
Exactly.
But they're
So-
buying, it's an ultimate, yeah.
It
it's a
is,
savings
but that-
down the
but that-
line because they're buying out at a cheaper.
Right, but
rate.
that $8 million or $13 million annual might turn out to be
When you say,
9, 10, or 15. What
when
you're
you
saying,
buyout, you mean payout?
what you're saying is that we would, let's say
Buy back
you've
it.
got sick leave
Yeah, buy
accumulated,
back.
and you want to take that sick leave and get paid out for it today,
Paid.
while you're still working. You didn't leave,
Because they buy back.
and the statute might include that. too.
Well, yeah, the statute allows only for the annual year and it's limited to 80%.
And I think at the time I spoke to Ted, we were trying to do something through like a 403B and it was not allowed under IRS statute. Because the statute precludes us from paying somebody for their sick leave while they're still working for us. They have to separate it from us. Right?
No. You can pay out on an annual basis. So
Right.
what you earned that year, but only 80%.
Right, yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
that's what I was gonna say. I know New York
Statute
has a
allows
buyback,
that,
a buyback system, and
Yeah.
but it has to be that year.
That
So
year.
And you obviously you make the rules of how many, you can't say you can buy back everything.
Right.
You would say you can buy back up to, you can buy 1, you can buy up to 3. I mean, the rules would be
Well,
determined.
yeah, but then what we were trying to do back then, we were trying to prevent it from being taxable because then it becomes taxable income. So we were trying to see if there was a way you could roll it into like a 403B and that
I
was
see,
precluded by
that I can
IRS
see
statute.
being, yeah, that I can see being a problem. I mean, it's just something to think about to let, again, access to.
So
cash
part of the
into-
reason though that it didn't, wasn't met with a lot of favor was that people then who were sick would not be getting paid at, would not be out with any pay. If you were paid out every year, 80% of what you accrued for the preceding year, you don't have any sick days. So next year you're out sick and you're out without getting paid.
No, that's why I'm saying
Yes.
you would not be allowed to do, that would not
We would
be,
differ the number of.
you would be allowed to
Yeah.
only take, like,
But-
let's say I had 5 still left over, but I'm only allowed to buy back 2.
Right, but if you
I'm
see,
not allowed to buy
if you
back.
see the number of people that have 15 years with no sick days left,
They can't buy back
It's-
anything.
no, they can't buy back anything, but they still get sick.
Yeah.
And so, and they still need time and they don't have it, so they're out without pay. And so I think especially what's happened over the last, now we're on year 3, we realize that sick days are valuable to have in the bank in case something happens. And We wouldn't not, we discussed this, would not want a policy that encourages people to take cash instead of having those available sick days. So we don't think that's a good policy.
Yeah, I can understand why it's not a great policy under, sort of under, I don't know what we call normal anymore, but normal circumstances, but I think especially now, like you said, we realize that there's a greater emphasis on sick time, and people need to plan for, I hate to say it, but potentially catastrophic illness in a way they might not have before.
Is this catastrophic?
Yes, catastrophic, like Nancy's sinus infection.
That it is.
Yeah. I'm
Write that
sorry, I
down.
know you're not going, but
Right, that down.
But also, I think that one of the other side of that coin that is something else to consider is the rising this steep rise of the cost of living, particularly when it comes to housing, like specific to here, where we're actually sitting right now, and we had the 40% increase in just the cost of housing in this area. That might put people in a position where ideally, they don't want to borrow against their future health. Obviously, we wouldn't encourage anybody to do that, but if it's a matter of keeping a roof over their heads, and keeping the lights on, I can see how people
Or
might.
leaving Pinellas because they can't afford to
Yeah.
live here anymore.
It's a
That's
different
our-
pressure.
That's one of our biggest concerns is the enormous increase in this specific area that is causing a lot of people to make the decision to leave Pinellas, not necessarily because they're unhappy with the position, but because they just simply can't afford to
Which
live
is
here
why,
anymore. I mean,
I
we
live it
know-
every day, so I fully understand, and which is why we have maintained, and we're not changing our 3.25%, average
We're
increase,
Trying to increase people's salaries.
trying to
We're
keep
trying
that
to-
salary moving
And
forward.
yeah, that's
Which is the best.
We have to.
yeah, and the
we
sick
have
leave
to.
concept is a good concept, but that's really not a solution, because again, you're gonna hate to hear this, it's non-recurring, even to an individual, it's a non-recurring source of revenue, right? I mean, so if I'm an employee and I've got 12 sick days I got this year, and I didn't use any of them, and I can cash out 80%, I rely upon that 80% that I got. And the next year I get sick and I got no sick leave, now I don't have that 80% to do, so it's kind of it's a dangerous financial management technique, actually, from an employee standpoint.
So I think we did that. We did terminal pay, and our, just mentioned the salary again. So I think the. is
The
there
other
one
thing was
Cost
the
and
amount that's
coverage.
paid when a teacher covers classes increased from $12 an hour to $15 an hour. The request was an increase to 20. We came back with a- Yes,
I just wanted to inquire, when was the last time that was changed?
What was that?
The amount of recovery
The
time?
covering, when did it go from 10 to 12?
I couldn't answer that honestly. I don't
I
know.
think it was 10 when I first came here 21 years ago.
Yeah,
I think it was 10, but I don't remember when in that time
I
it
don't,
changed
I
to
don't
12.
have, I'm not even gonna begin to guess on that. I don't know.
yeah, I honestly don't know. I could find that out probably for you, but I don't know.
I think it was $12 when I started 15 years ago.
It's probably true. It's probably about
Yeah, I
that.
was gonna say, I know it was a while ago.
So we recognize
We
that,
recognize
and again, we're trying to keep that moving along, right? So,
Actually, and thank you for that reminds me, there was some discussion last night in the group that pointed out, so we were explaining that the second sentence of Article 28 was, we explained that the way that we had understood it yesterday was that sentence was redundant, and so therefore it didn't need to be in there. And I think at first glance, it did appear that it was really just explaining, hey, we're going to pay you to cover the coverage rate is the equivalent of what we wouldn't be paid or wouldn't be paying to a substitute teacher. And then it goes on to explain what that procedure is or what the levels are, which is fine. But Paula actually brought up a really good point that at the elementary level, this coverage procedure doesn't, or coverage policy doesn't work the same way at the elementary level, and that this sentence did speak a little bit more to the way that it operates at the elementary level. And I think, not that we necessarily need to get the sentence, but we do need to consider what it would look like in the elementary.
Right, there's
Paula, do you
nothing
wanna-
there.
She stepped out.
Yeah,
Oh,
but-
no, I'm
but-
sorry.
there's
well, I think
nothing-
she knows
Sorry.
because she was an elementary
Right, no,
principal,
Because
yeah.
basically, they don't cover periods the way we
Correct.
do.
Right.
So you can't say per hour, the per hour, it was basically, I believe, a substitute's pay. And then it usually got split among, because the class got
Well, there
split.
is a total, right, for the day, and that's how we get I mean, in our mind, right? We do it by the hour because of periods and so forth for secondary.
Right.
And so whatever that is, and you'll probably be able to speak to this too, if it's split between 3 teachers, it's split 3 ways,
So if you-
right? So
If you
then
look
it's-
down to the 1, 2, 3 line from the bottom,
Mhm.
it says if less than an hour or period, the amount will be prorated. So I think that.
Yeah, but
addresses
it's
that.
more than an hour. period.
Yeah,
It's a
that's
full
what
day.
was, that was what was tricky
Well-
about it. And I mean, knowing that this happens, but not really applying until Paula brought it up, not really applying it to
As
this, to
usual.
this
Yeah.
proposal. It was, what will happen is they will disperse a class, split a class. And so any one teacher is going to be receiving fewer than the entire class, but it will be for, in most cases, the entire day.
Of course.
So she was, I think, correct in that.
So there are so many, so when I'm gonna try to, I'm not Dave Richmond from payroll, so I'm gonna try to do this with that, but I will fess up right now that I will probably not speak this correctly. What we do with that sense then is, again, the teachers who split, so if it's $15, if that's our proposal, $15 per hour, and I think it's 6 periods then through the day. Let's just go with 6, let's just, yeah,
Mhm.
anyway. Then I would get $5 per hour because I split it. The 3 of us would get $5 per hour for those 6 hours, right? It's taken the total and separating it between the number of teachers. Now, there is a number, a limit, and I don't know this off the top of my head. I can't split it between 10 people, right? There is a limit of how many you can split it because it would be like, okay, $1 an hour then if I split it between 10. But there is a process and we can get that to you.
Yeah.
We'll get Dave to send that over to you about how we handle it in elementary. Because the secretary would need to codes in how many people do the covering. Sometimes you split it between 2 teachers. Well, then you get half of that,
Right.
of whatever the amount is. And it's all
Whatever the total
coded, like it
Yeah, so-
obviously has
So
to be
they have
programmed
the
in.
secretary of the payroll preparer at the school prorates it among the teachers that take those students essentially
Mhm.
at the elementary level.
Gotcha.
So
And
if you
it's,
had-
and so even if that process is in place, obviously, it's not like it's not been done, clearly there's a process in place. But I think
But yeah,
that would be the reason why that sentence isn't exactly redundant. And because I agreed with you, to me, looking at it through the lens of a former high school teacher, it made sense that this was basically just an intro. And then the rest of it was explaining the process. But I think that you would, if we take that sentence out, it does one of 2 things. It either doesn't address what happens at the elementary level, or it provides that elementary teachers $15 an hour, even if they're splitting, which I think the truth of it is probably somewhere between the 2. So we might need language here.
to differentiate.
And
That's what
define
I
what
think is-
actually-
One of our
Prorated
proposals
about that.
had the
Yeah.
differentiate between elementary and secondary, but we just
I
typed it
see.
as you asked, so.
Okay.
Right,
And
no,
we don't
we-
care, the
Yeah.
problem is if substitute pay goes up, this sentence says this is what the pay is, period, $15 an hour.
Right.
So,
So there just needs, maybe that sentence doesn't need to come back in, but a sentence explaining the
sentence
process
about-
for the elementary
If it's
needs to go in.
You might not just-
prorated by-
It doesn't need to
prorated
be
by
that
number of
one.
students,
Yeah, you
or
might
number
actually-
of split
I just need to
classes or
add
something.
on to that sentence where it says
Because-
if less than an hour.
15 times 6. Thank you.
so it doesn't
She knows me so
discuss
well.
the elementary
the-
dispersing.
Prorated
So
by
you're
number of
saying, right.
students. Yeah, so, okay, let us, well, yeah.
That's what I think is all that's missing.
Okay.
Because it's not really the sub pay,
Yeah.
it's the total of the $15 an hour for however many hours.
You could say
Okay, we'll work
if
on,
less than an hour.
we get what you're,
or
we
class
understand that.
in
Okay.
elementary,
Or you could just say if
And I'm sorry, Paula
If
stepped
the
out, but she could have
students are
articulated it much more
dispersed among.
concisely than
I
I
get
did.
it. I
There's a number
I
of
fully
limits
You
to
obviously,
what
you
the
know,
process, If they're
Yep.
dispersed among no more than blank teachers, because he won't do it over 10.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, we need to get with him
Yeah.
about that, because I don't know what the
Yeah,
number
okay.
is that.
It's
Okay.
just, it
So
has to
Albert-
be articulated.
Dave's
with her.
arbitrary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
And that even needs to be clarified at the middle school and high school level, because like when I was teaching middle school, if the teacher was out, but there was no sub, then one, at our school, they were taking that class of kids and splitting 2 to 3 kids into each classroom each period. So, there would be 10 of us that would have 2 or 3.
But I have a
kids.
feel. Let me talk
Let
to
us
Dave
look-
about.
let us look
let
what actually
Dave is
happens.
what-
We don't really know the
what's on that,
semantics.
but,
So if
yeah.
there is, like you're saying, a maximum, then that needs to just be addressed as well.
And I just think we
for
have to
middle
be,
school.
I think we have to be I think we all have to be understanding that there's only so many divisions by divisions by divisions. Like I can only take an amount of money and divide it by this many teachers, by this many students, so
Yeah, sure.
it's got to be in a system that is manageable
Sure,
and not
absolutely.
necessarily
Right,
by head
but
count.
Like
And
my thinking is, it would.
no, I understand.
Those middle
Yep.
school teachers that are taking 2 to 3 kids extra each period, if there's, it's not their fault that they're splitting them up between 10 classes.
Right, that
And
just
it's
shouldn't be a
not fair
practice.
to not
It
compensate
really
them
just
for
shouldn't
that.
be a practice.
It's
Right.
like. this
But
whole
again,
thing-
I'm gonna, because I hear that and I'm listening to you saying that, I think, oh my gosh, there are some schools or some grade levels or some subjects that want to say, listen, we're just gonna do these 2 split and I'm gonna, the 2 teachers decide, we're just gonna do it. Other schools are like, no, I don't want to do it. So I don't want to take it away from the school to make the decision, the teachers to make the decision on how they want
Yeah.
to help out with the
It's like,
splitting.
it doesn't necessarily have to be articulated by grade level. It needs to be articulated by process.
It
If you
is.
Split,
And I think it is. And
Yeah.
let's let Dave
Yeah.
come and
Yeah.
give us
and that really
information on
should
that.
be in the front, yeah. it should
Yeah,
be
that
here.
just needs to be.
Well, it needs to be, it's a process that's in place and it needs to be, make sure that it's shared. Okay.
And if you want to just leave the sentence in as is, that's fine
Yeah.
too.
But that won't address the elementary school.
It doesn't really, I don't
I
think,
mean, it does, but
because it's not a substitute bid. It's not, that's not.
I think simply.
And that's why we want to make sure because we're agreeing upon a total
true.
here, right?
yeah, that's true.
Okay. Anything else that?
Have you had a time to, I know you did on Teams last night, but have you had time to caucus on those issues which are new? Do you want us to leave and give you some time to consider those?
I think there were just some questions that came
Okay.
up from what we discussed. And and now the question about that issue has just already been resolved. That was one of the questions that came up last night about the elementary split.
Okay.
But I do know other questions came up, so I guess, do you want to ask your own questions? Or do you want me to just, I did write down the questions you guys had.
I think you can read over the questions that we had.
I mean, one of the questions about the mandated additional training, if that training is to get, those 12 hours are going to be paid at the hourly rate. And it's mandated training, we get that it's mandated training that you would already have to take. But as of right now, it's offered both within school hours and outside of school hours, and you have that option. If this takes place where it's being paid at your hourly rate, is it only going to be available outside?
No. There's going to be inside, outside, and it gives the
It's only when
teachers
you
the
are doing it
flexibility.
outside, you
to-
would now get the hourly rate rather than the,
Correct.
than
Or the
20
proposed
Right,
2250.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was right, that was one question, I get that right? Okay.
And that is the same with this, the targeted training. So there's targeted and then there's additional training that everybody takes anyway. But this targeted training would be something that would be offered in the summer, it would be offered at night, it would be offered on professional development days. If you wanted to take it during the contract time and it's available, if you want to take it afterward, you mark it down as this is what I did and you're getting paid. So you can fill this, so it gives that option.
Okay,
But not necessarily additional required trainings. This is just what we would probably already be doing anyway. I was a little concerned about the word additional.
Well, there's always additional things that need to be fit into the schedule. And that's what we hear is there's not enough time. So that's why, we're adding 2 days of training to get
The
paid for.
availability for you to take
To
it during
take it.
those days of training that it's available for you to go ahead and do that. We're going to offer that for you so you can do it then as opposed to on your already assigned days. But if you don't want to do that, then it's going to be offered, because of course we want it to be offered.
Gotcha,
Right,
that's what
because you
I-
have to take it in. You do
You
have
gotta
to
take it anyway.
You just gotta take it at some
Not
point.
another like additional 12 hours in the summer. This is stuff
No.
we're already.
It's just providing a stipend for.
It is a
choose to do
way
it
to
after.
give
Right.
an hourly rate for training that is important and supports the initiatives through the.
ESSER and
ESSER
and American Recovery.
Okay.
Sorry.
That was actually question number 3,
I'm sorry.
Miss Bringle.
Get out of work.
Okay, now we're on to number 4.
We went right by number 2, which I'm trying to remember what this was about. I think hourly rate. Oh, which hourly rate is going to be used?
Oh, yeah.
And that was because of the difference between, I don't know who initiated that question.
10-month and 12-month payout.
It's gonna,
People see as a different hourly rate depending, how will they know, like, will that be communicated, and, you know, and just the process of that, determining that hourly rate. My hourly rate's different because I have my pay spread out across 12. months.
Well,
It's
you're-
not technically
you're-
hourly
you're out-
rate, you know what I
in,
mean?
in
If you
theory,
look at-
and actually in practice, your hourly rate is the same.
Right.
It's the payout that's different because it's
So we
equalized pay. So
So it
it'll
would just
be,
your
it'll
actual
be
hourly
actual
rate.
hourly rate, but then the way you get paid will be based upon whether you select a 12-month option or not.
Okay, so the math we did then, your base salary with no referendum, just your base salary divided by, I think it's 1,785 hours of work,
I don't know.
technically
1485.
1485.
Yeah.
That would be your hourly, that's what they'll use.
Yeah, I believe that's true. And that's the way you get paid, well, you know,
It
when we,
sounded so,
It sounds,
yeah, it
sounds like
sounded
I
good.
really knew.
Sounds
what
I
I
so
know,
was
I
doing.
was impressed there, Nancy.
when we pay you by operation, if you're on a 12-month option, we withhold a little bit of your pay to pay you over those days that you wouldn't normally get paid.
I get it, I just wanted to make.
Yeah.
I didn't know if everyone realized that was listening. Okay. thank you.
Is there a place in the employee student or service center, whatever that's
Self-serve.
called,
Yes.
that actually shows what our specific hourly rate of our base salary is, so we don't have to.
Let's
use
look
that?
it up.
Let me take a look.
Yeah, let's look.
I have a
I
computer right
couldn't
here.
Find where it was when I looked mine up and, I just.
couldn't either.
It's on the sheet there.
Isn't it on your
Yeah,
paycheck too?
But
Yeah,
on
but-
my, but she said on my pay
The one on
stub,
the
because
paycheck.
I'm paid 12 months, then it's different than what my actual base hourly rate is.
Like if you look at the part where it says salary, it shows you your total salary, doesn't show you what your
Hourly rate is, and if it doesn't show, is it possible to get it on there so people can understand what their base hourly rate is?
Question.
Let me look at
That's in
me.
Terms.
Let's
so
see.
maybe we
I know
could
it's
do
in
that.
terms, but. we
Yeah,
don't
but
see
right,
terms.
maybe we could figure out a way.
That's
to
what
do that.
she's talking. She's
Yeah.
just, we're trying to problem solve.
Yeah.
We're not trying
Yeah,
to answer.
Good problem solving.
Trying.
And I'm sorry to pull the team off, that's just a clarification, so.
We'll have an answer
I'll get
shortly.
you an answer in a second
The
here.
wizard is
Well,
at the
No.
computer.
It'll be an answer. It may not be a definitive answer.
Sorry, Madam President.
Let's see. Hourly rate.
We were also interested to know if you, because it does say that the form to be filled out for any of these things would be created by the district. And we were thinking that it would make more sense for us to collaborate on the form. Because some of the forms in existence right now for things like that are incredibly time consuming.
You understand that this form would not be time consuming because we don't have people adding to this position to take care of this. So I am fully in
That's what I-
agreement with you on
Yes.
We
this.
want it to be very
And I
simple,
would
easy to
say,
understand.
If we
Take
can
a post-it note.
work it together so that it is simple and it's as basic as
So,
possible.
but
to-
it's gonna be as simple and basic as possible. It's gonna have to have certain elements because this is federal funding, it's been paying it.
Oh, true that. Sorry
And
about
they
that.
have
No,
to,
no, you do have to
Yeah.
have, I mean, it's like any timesheet, you do
Right.
have to show.
but it
what
it
you've
will not
done,
be an overbearing.
But we
element to
just
it.
don't,
We're
some
not
of the
looking to make-
paperwork is a little excessive.
Same thing, like a checkbox on here says, I certify I worked an extra 7.5 hours this year. Done.
For the
We are-
training,
we
it
are
would be
similar.
just what training, because they're gonna be a bunch of modules, just indicate what you did. I mean, that was what we were thinking. It's not gonna be anything more than,
It's not gonna be like that.
this is what I did.
Because that's, yeah.
And
that's
the
what I would
trainings are
think
like-
it's an enormous workload if it's, if these are
Right,
massive.
right.
forms.
when, and maybe I'm jumping the gun, when paid out, will it show on a regular pay stub or on a separate additional pay stub? And does it count towards our salary for retirement?
The answer to that is no and yes.
You're being paid for an extra day, so yes, that would be part of your
Yeah, so
compensation. That
it's,
would
it
include
wouldn't be on a separate
retirement.
pay stub, but I mean,
It would be included in your regular pay stub.
but it will be eligible for retirement.
Guys, you're going through all these questions, so I'm not playing anymore.
Okay, so.
No, I think that was it. We did be covering classes. Oh, I think one question, if the training stipend, the one that's going to 2250, does that start in January, or is that, or does that start next year? Does
That
that
would-
start this year, or does that start next year?
That would start this year.
This year.
The regular
Yeah.
upping of the training stipend? And what
Approval.
what was asked was, would it be retro?
No,
No.
Okay. Would it be retro to January, beginning of second
I
semester?
think of retro to when it's approved, right?
right.
Yeah. I mean,
Upon
we-
approval,
we-
yeah.
Upon
Yeah, we don't
approval.
know when it's gonna be approved,
Yeah.
hopefully.
And the paperwork associated with those is so cumbersome to go back to retro would be very hard to do.
Yeah, yeah, so you can't do it.
It's
even
all hand
to the
paperwork.
beginning of the semester. Okay, I'm out of breath. So anybody else want to?
I do have a follow-up question, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
Our wizard over here sparked one. Okay, so when Juliana was asking, or when we were asking what hourly it would be paid out at, this, for the training, or the
Planning.
planning. So for instance, on my paycheck, it shows I make $26 an hour. But in all actuality, because I'm spread over 12 months, in all actuality, my hourly is really 34. So on my paycheck, am I going to be paid that 26 and then they're going to hold some to give me later? Or am I going to be paid that 34?
I think you said that upside down, actually.
Okay,
Because what's happening is your actual pay rate is going to be higher than what your equalized pay rate is going to be,
right,
right?
exactly,
So if you're being paid under normal circumstances, $34 an hour,
right.
and your equalized rate is 26,
Mhm.
you'll be paid at the 24, but on your pay stub, it's going to reflect the 26 because it's equalized over the course of the whole year. So that's,
So-
and to answer the original question Juliana had, I don't see any place on here where it shows easily it basically shows your annual salary. It doesn't really break it down by hourly rate unless you look at the pay stub. The pay stub shows by hourly, but the pay stub is the equalized rate, not the annual rate. So it is confusing. So I'll talk to Dave and see if there's a way we can put that on here. I don't think it's that difficult to do.
Yeah, I think it would come in handy for something, if something like this goes through, because we're not hourly employees. We get why there's no hourly rate there, because we're not hourly employees. But if you are going to do things based on an hourly rate, people will probably need to know what that is.
Especially if you have on the pay for performance side, everybody's salary is different.
Well, there's gotta be a
It would
way
just
to
make it
do that
easier
because
for
we
people
Oh,
to
yes.
see.
Yeah.
no,
There's
I
a
mean,
way to do
It's
it.
in terms.
Yeah.
If you had
It's in
access to terms, you
so
can go
we
and
just
look and
gotta
see what
figure
your
out a way to
actual rate
make
is.
it
So it's just that,
Readily readable.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, people probably don't generally look for it, which is probably why it was never put on here, but now it may be a reason to put it out there, so we could look at it.
Right, I think you're right, because we are salaried, so we don't think of ourselves in that way of hourly rate.
Anytime you ask Dave a question about a confusing payroll issue, if you say, why is it so, it's equalized pay. That's his answer.
That's his answer to everything.
And what that does is quell further questions.
So I think the main issue was, well, first of all, before I say anything else, I just want to say, we asked before Christmas, we asked for creative ideas and solutions, and we really want to acknowledge that that is what you did. That we asked for you to have, because we had already put out ideas, and I want to first really acknowledge and show appreciation for that. Because clearly, these are kind of out of the box thinking, the way we were asking for, to try to see how we could do this. And I just want to say thank you. That's most important.
Well, You're welcome. We appreciate you recognizing that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, we absolutely do. And I was very, it did. It takes a lot of thinking and work and figuring it out. What's it gonna cost? Can we do this? What can we do here? I definitely see all of that. The only problem is it doesn't address, it addresses it to some extent, our initial problem of the inequity. It does do something because hourly rates, obviously, someone who has more time in, at their hourly rate, they're going to be paid at a different level. But it is, again, something that's going to go across the board. So once again, the veterans are still coming in at the lowest percentages, which was why we were looking at the percentage spreads. Because, well, we knew it, but we wanted to see it, you know? I mean, obviously, I'm no math genius, but I do know generalities about how math works. And I knew that if you're doing something across the board, it's gonna help a little bit. It's not gonna take us where we wanted to be. And that was the main downside to the ideas. The other downside was a lot of people, and I don't know what the feedback will be from people who might be listening to bargaining. I don't know. That's why I encouraged people to listen tonight, because I like to get their feedback. But certainly the feedback from the team was that it just felt like we have to do more to get something. And technically that's not true, because you have to take the mandated training anyway. You have to do planning. That's for sure. These are things you already do, and you're going to now get better pay or pay for some of it. Obviously, since a teacher does about, well, maybe not, maybe let's say 7.5 hours of planning every 2 weeks even. It's a start, but it's a really small start. I mean, there were, the words insulting did come up. Also, and including the ESE people, which is 2. And I think one of the things that they were looking at, and we will put together a counter, like you did say that you would, you would, and we just haven't had time to do that. I'm just giving you an idea of what the immediate feedback was. And that's not from the whole membership, that's from the team. I mean, I'm really hoping that our members are listening and that I will hear feedback further to see, and I will be asking for it, because this is their contract. It's not my contract. I was hoping for more equity. That was my goal. That was to take care of the veterans, and I get that you were trying to do that to some extent. I do see it. I'm not minimizing it in any way. I just think that it will still be painful to your veterans that we're not doing something specifically to help the teachers who have been here longest. So that's my big problem with this. Otherwise, and I would say probably leaning more towards the planning and less to the training. 2 days of planning, 1 day of training. The mandate, we know, I mean, they do their trainings anyway. And it will be nice to have it go from 20, even just to 2250. And that, of course, is across the board. I just think that the planning is what is wiping our people out. The grading, the planning. The fact that because they are covering classes so much, especially in today's crazy up and down COVID world, they do a lot of it at home, even more of it at home than they used to, because they're not getting their planning because they're covering. So I just think that those are some of the ideas that we're thinking about and that came up. to try to maybe manipulate this a little bit to be acceptable to to be able to get this. I understand the unwillingness, I don't fully understand it. I have to be honest, I can't help myself. I don't fully understand the resistance to the longevity idea. Because it exists in so many other places and it works. It keeps people, it makes people stay, because anyone who's getting to that point where they're saying, oh my God, I'm exhausted, I gotta go. And they're like, if I stay another couple of years, I'm gonna get a little bump, I'm gonna stay. It works. And even if this nonsense law wasn't in place, it works. It works everywhere. I just think it's something that should be phasing in to Pinellas in order to keep Pinellas viable and keep our good talent here. That is one of the main reasons I wanted to see that. Yes, I wanted to try to counter the damaging effects of that very unfair and unconstitutional law. Yes, but I also would love to see it phased in because it's good for the county. It's not just good for teachers, it's good for the county. So that's
Okay, so.
that's just what I was thinking.
Okay.
And I believe did I get everybody's questions that came up last night? That came up about this offer, because I know there was also a comment about Article 29, which just happened to be right under covering classes, so they noticed that last sentence was taken out and wanted to know why that was.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Borderline question, mostly comment. So, my overall just concern with this is the sunset. Now I understand that the idea that this is being paid with the federal funds. But I mean, right, one of my biggest things personally is the amount of time spent outside of the classroom.
Right.
So it's nice to see the getting paid
Right.
for that at all is cool.
Okay.
But so after 2024, then basically my time that I've already spent outside the classroom working is no longer considered valuable. And that's how I'm gonna take it. Like, that's how I see it. And I know I'm not alone. So I just think that's something that we need to keep in mind. I like a lot of this, but that is something, just for the team, just in general, to keep in mind, because so after 2024, now we're not gonna pay you for the time that we know that you're working.
So, again, we were charged with coming back with ideas
Yeah.
and thinking outside, and we have this money for a certain amount of time, and that has been a request of us to look at that, and you're right. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you on
Yeah.
that. But again, we would not be fiscally responsible for if we look 3 years ahead and designate that money. Now, when we reconvene for the next contract and we look at that, and if that's something important and we want to continue, again, it's same thing like your budget at home.
Yeah.
If I want to spend it
Yeah.
here, where am I going to take it here? Or
Yeah.
whatever. So I hear what you're saying. I
Yeah.
thank you for
We do.
sharing, and
That's,
everything you're thinking is
I
something.
think
we're
Lindsay brought this up many times, and she's right, that, a budget is an annual process, and that's something that we have to look at every year. What resources do we have? What can we live with, what we can live without, what can we afford, what we can't afford? So to Paula's point, as we approach that, we'll have to look at it and see what we
Yeah.
do. We might not be able to afford it. I'll be brutally honest with you. I mean, this is a big, giant pot of money. This is roughly a third of our operating fund budget. It's about $1 billion. So, it's a significant amount of 20% anyway. It's a significant amount of money. We'll have to look at it as we do with everything every year. And, we acknowledge the fact that that is the case. But to Paula's point, it's a pot of money we have for a certain period of time, and it goes away.
Well, I think that it's, we approach this annually, but I think what I was speaking more to was the idea that the budget really is about priorities and that, that if
Well-
we're planning for a particular period of time.
So don't think
it
that we don't have a
allows-
long-term approach. We
No,
do.
of course,
Yeah.
of course. I mean, nothing about this evidence is that it just came up or that, you know, there's a great deal of thought and planning that goes into it. But I think that there is, you know, if people can understand that these are these funds, they're here for this long,
Right.
this is what we proposed for it, but it gives us some time to plan for
Absolutely.
what the end, you know, the end of that period looks like. That I think that is something that, you know, people being reassured about is helpful as well.
Absolutely.
Right, and I want to reiterate that, I mean, I really am, when you presented this, first of all, we met with you yesterday morning. There was the willingness for the district to come right up and push the COVID leave forward and continue it during this very obnoxious surge. So appreciative of that there was no fight, there was no pushing that, it was, yes, this is what we're gonna do. Yes, we're going to take care of everybody until this thing is over again. We're gonna do it again. I was very, very proud of that I really was. And the fact that you were, looking over the protocols to do that as well. And then to see that you went to all of this trouble to really try to answer our needs. I mean, I don't want you to think that I don't appreciate that or none of us do, because I do.
Can I interject something too before it goes out of my head and mention the MOU? I am trying to get that out to employees tomorrow, just about the updated MOU.
I
It's been
know.
a busy day
We've
today,
both-
as you can
it's been-
imagine, so I'm getting a couple emails, so I'm just wanting to say, while I had my audience too, that information is gonna get out.
I know.
pronto,
And
and I will
did-
take care of
When,
that.
when people have written, some people have written or called in to the MSDs and have asked,
But just
what's
for the
gonna happen?
general
I
group,
just
yeah,
tested
yeah.
positive. And we've been telling them individually, you're gonna be covered.
General
It's a
group
done
out
deal.
there, it's working
We
on it,
just
yeah,
have to get, it's just the official announcement will come out.
Yeah.
And we do have to get the paper ratification
Yeah, yeah.
cracking, because we want to do
And as
this
soon
as
as we get
quickly
this,
as we
as soon as
can.
we get this out, that'll answer everybody's questions. So
Absolutely,
anyway, so
that'll
just wanted
calm
to-
them down and
Sorry to
then
interrupt,
and then
just
I'll
wanted
let
to-
them know right away about the ratification.
Yeah,
And we're going to move forward quickly on that because it is just an extension. We don't have to make a big fuss about the ratification because it really is just an extension of the exact same language. So
I
whatever.
actually want to echo what Nancy's saying, and I think especially for people that are watching, because this bargaining team is very experienced, obviously, you know, we're all sitting here, y'all, with a great deal of, we've been to this table many times over many years. But people watching at home might not have an idea of what this looks like. They know that this is what we do, but not necessarily what it looks like. And so I do sometimes think, I wonder if people look at, you know, these are tough conversations to have. They're naturally difficult conversations to have and can get heated sometimes. So when people tune in, I wonder if they think that it's just fighting all the time. And it is, that's a stressful thing. I think it's important to emphasize that what happened yesterday and what's happened so far today has been so collaborative, that I think that's really important that people see that even though this can be a difficult process and emotions can run very high, we came yesterday with, to hammer out the MOU, and there was not a single point, not one single point of disagreement. With our versions were identical out of the gate. And that was really encouraging and really reassuring. And it was just, it was a feel good thing that even though that wasn't something that, that we did online, I want people to know that happened so that they can understand, as the whole team does, that as difficult as this whole big process can be and as emotionally charged as it can be, it really is for a good cause, and that people are everybody's trying to come at it to try to do the right thing and to support and to value
Right.
people. So that was really encouraging.
It really was. It was, and I wanted to make sure you knew that.
Thank you. We
That they-
appreciate
Yes,
that.
I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
did want to make
This
sure,
is
and I
fun.
wanted to make sure the members heard
Yeah.
that, because it's not, I mean,
Creating-
we're gonna, butt heads every once in a while, but
Coming up with a plan is so much harder then tweaking it, then editing it, then cleaning it up. And so coming in with a really innovative plan, that means something, that the time and effort that went into it was exactly what we asked for y'all to do. So we appreciate that.
Yes.
And so
So now you are gonna pay for all the planning for.
we're looking forward to a counter proposal.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what I heard you say is one of the big issues that is the equity of the veteran teachers, or I say the teachers that are on the grandfather
Grandfather.
schedules, because we do have many veteran teachers on the performance schedule. So it's not,
All,
it's the
right.
schedule, yeah. And I could make we like this structure. We think this structure will satisfy any audit because it is using the federal funds in the way intended.
Appropriate.
I could throw out some suggestions to address the equity, and that is perhaps for veteran teachers, there is more training or planning required to, develop certain things that the people right out of school are doing. I don't know, but I'm just throwing those out. Using this structure for developing that equity is something we're not against, but we have to link it to the purpose of these funds and not just say that, and not just call it an annual adjustment, which violates the statute. So we're open to your counters, but we'd like to do it within this structure. So you can be creative within this, and we're happy to hear your ideas.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
You
sir.
have a couple of questions behind you.
Yeah, I have an idea about valuing the longevity, obviously, of employees in the sense that as they have more experience, their mentoring abilities that you give to the younger teachers is something that could be valued in the same structure that you proposed.
Come
Put
forward
in a
with your
proposal.
ideas,
Yeah.
is what we're saying.
Put it
That's-
together.
We're
We-
not opposed to hearing these.
We just bear in mind, we have to be able to, number one, monitor it and be able to report it in a certain way. And secondly, we have to be able to defend it against an audit that we know we're gonna have. We know we're gonna have this, a huge amount of money. We know the feds are gonna come down and audit us. We have to make sure that whatever we do is defensible in an audit, because we don't want to have to pay this money back.
But that's a good suggestion.
It's an
And there are
excellent suggestion.
legitimate reasons why there should be more planning or more, or whatever that results in more compensation. But it just can't be, we pay more for people who've been here longer.
Right.
Because that is not,
I was
going
listening
to work.
just the other day, I heard it was a news article basically on NPR, and they were talking about the fact that this huge surge of federal funds, primarily to school districts, has been looked at with a great deal of scrutiny by the public, because they tend to look at that.
They
But
will.
school districts are magnets.
Yep.
For public oversight and really suspicion, I think. And they were saying that even with this huge influx and in a relatively short period of time, for the most part, school districts have been stepping up, and certainly, and I would count Pinellas among them, stepping up and doing the right thing with these funds. That it has been shown that just even though it was quick and even though it was a ton with relatively little restriction on it, which is a good thing, but it can be a little scary with,
can be.
not knowing what to do when. That generally they have been handled with responsibility and with the appropriate purpose. So
Absolutely.
that's encouraging.
It most definitely is. And they're gonna be scrutinized, I guarantee it.
Mhm.
So it's a huge amount of money nationwide, and I expect the government to look at it.
Just a quick clarification for Mr. Smith. So we have this handout,
Yes,
we have this one,
yes.
okay. On the green
aren't they the
class
same?
one, projected increase 3.25% and the cost of 11,000,006.
Mhm.
But on the all white sheet, it's 13,700.
That includes fringe. You're welcome. You're welcome. Fringe, yeah, which is Social Security, Medicare, and retirement. You're welcome.
So that's right, that was a missing question.
Yeah.
That did come up last night. I apologize.
Yeah, the
Okay.
11 and
Nancy
change
needs
is
to go.
just the
I'm gonna
3.25%
be,
fringe on
yes,
top of that.
I think the meeting's over when I pass out. I would say that's a natural.
You're almost
ending.
there.
Or if you turn blue.
Okay, so you all take it back, work on a counter, and you'll just let us know when you're ready to reschedule, or not reschedule, or
Send
schedule.
it, and we
another
can
meeting.
talk and then schedule a meeting and
Yeah. we-
Yeah.
we can-
Okay.
yeah, if you want to send it over early, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right, feel better,
Tomorrow's
Nancy.
Friday.
Yeah, get
Thank you.
And
Thank goodness tomorrow's Friday. I'm just.
Nancy, my Irish grandmother would tell you this.
Are you
Nancy,
listening, Nancy?
my Irish grandmother would tell you this. Go home and make yourself a nice pot of tea.
A nice pot of tea.
Or a
Put
hot
it-
toddy.
Put a bit of the pure in the tea. Add some honey. You'll be fine in the morning.
I was gonna say, I'm married to an Irishman. I know what's going in that tea.
Anybody want to take that with you? All right, have a good evening, guys. Thank
Yeah.
you.
The Italians will just give you pasta. That's all they
There you go.
do.
yeah.
Thank you.